I want to introduce Dave Four and Paul Murray from Sophos. Dave, or I'm sorry, Paul, take it over.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you. Thank you again for taking your time today to join us, and thank you to cStor for inviting us to talk to you today. My name is Paul Murray. I'm Product Director at Sophos for server protection within our end user security group. And as Neil's mentioned, I'm joined with my colleague Dave Four, Enterprise Account Executive. So our main topic for today is intelligent synchronized security and revolutionizing advanced threat protection. I'm going to spend a few minutes just talking about our existing portfolio and what we believe in our key philosophies, and then I'm going to dive into really exciting enhancements that we're making to our product around synchronized security. And then after I've spent around 15 minutes looking at that, I'm going to hand over to Dave to speak more specifically around our Sophos for NetApp storage offering as well. So let's talk about the portfolio. So the primary motivation for cybercrime these days is money, and as long as there's money to be made, criminals will take the opportunity to pick our pockets. So how does Sophos help you in that situation? And we're going to start with a quick overview. Firstly, we believe security must be comprehensive, and what I mean by that is we need security to span across the network, servers, and critically all devices that the end user is using. And that includes access to your network storage as well. There really is no type of device these days for which you can say there is no malware. I mean, back in the day that people have thought for a long time that, hey, I've got a Mac, I'm good. But we know different, and we have a good product for that. With Sophos and our comprehensive suite of solutions, users can be protected at all points: network, endpoint, email, web, no matter where they go or whatever device they're using. And the second thing that we believe is that security can and should be made simple. Now, you're going to hear the word simple a lot through the next 10 to 15 minutes or so, because I'm going to keep hanging on to that. With all of our solutions, we strive to bring products to market that are effective but also simple. And by that I mean whether that's platform coverage, simple deployment, straightforward licensing, but most of all a product user experience which is intuitive and easy to use. We know that if a product is too complex, then not all features will be deployed or used. So simplicity is not just an ease of use, but we know that it's key to comprehensive security coverage. Now, why is simplicity so key? So I want to speak for a moment around this point. So whilst most security vendors in the market focus their efforts on the needs of large enterprise organizations, Fortune 2000 and above, Sophos is pretty unique in the market in that we focus on developing products for the other 60+ million organizations out there, the mid-market, small business, as well as pragmatic enterprises. And typically smaller organizations will have more limited dedicated security personnel and expertise, and the resources that those organizations have will typically be under time and budget pressures. Now, I had a quick scan of the registrant list for this particular session, and I'm pretty sure there's going to be some people listening nodding their heads right now saying, yeah, we don't have a huge number of dedicated security personnel. So I'm hoping that this session is going to resonate with you. So we focus on mid-market organizations and smaller organizations with limited security resources, as well as enterprises, pragmatic enterprises. We do this by designing security products that are simple to buy, simple to deploy, and simple to use. Now, before I dive into what I mean by synchronized security, I want to just talk for a moment about why are we doing this? Why are we looking at this? So firstly, there's a very fast-growing attack surface, and this is because people are using multiple devices and so many different types of device. I can almost guarantee that everyone I'm talking to right now has at least 2 or 3 devices, probably on their person as we speak. And people are using these devices in many different places. People's work is now where they are, not necessarily a place they go to anymore. And this is causing organizations to rethink how they protect themselves and protect their end users. It's more than just protecting a group of desktop workstations in your building these days. And secondly, threats themselves are changing. It's a very difficult and challenging time in the security landscape because the number and the sophistication of attacks is just going up and up. And these attacks and the attackers themselves are more coordinated and they're integrated. Now, history of I've just skipped over a slide there that I'm going to just talk to. There's a history of security products and the way in which we've had these in the market. So first of all, if you look back several years, at a range of point products, and each product, whether that be firewall, antivirus, device control, app control, etc., has a unique way of looking at the network, and that's just the nature of the beast. These are all competent products, but they really only provide a two-dimensional, side-on, unintegrated view of the environment, if you like. And then slightly more recently, over the last few years, the industry's had this concept of layered security, and what we mean by that is we have a collection of point products used together, the idea of better together. And I guess UTM is an example of a layered security at its best, covering many different areas and control points within a single system. So for years, the industry has tried bringing together solutions, I guess you call it defense in depth, to try and solve our security problems with those ingredients. And to quote our CTO, these are the right ingredients, but what's been missing is the recipe. And what we mean by the recipe is that we just haven't had any real meaningful exchange of information between the assets that we have on the network and what we have at the endpoint. So traditionally, with point products and even layered security, the endpoint and the network sides have been very separate. Both the systems themselves and, in larger organizations, perhaps even the people responsible for these systems, are working independently of each other. So if you think about getting these products and systems to interconnect and talk to each other, we really do have a new generation of security, which leads us to today, which is what Sophos is calling synchronized security. So synchronized security is the connection between different devices. It's integrated security where end user and network technologies share meaningful information to deliver better protection. And through Sophos Cloud, we're taking the Sophos next-gen firewall technology, which is our new XG series firewall, which GA'd just last week, and the Sophos endpoint technology, and having them talk to each other through what we're calling the security heartbeat. Now, the security heartbeat is the link between the endpoint and the network. This is brand new. Nobody else is doing this in the market, and it's hugely exciting for us. The heartbeat pulses contextual information about events and activity from the endpoint to the network firewall. So that all sounds great. I'm sure you're all nodding your heads. So, okay, let's get real. What does that really mean for you in real life? What are the advantages of having a security heartbeat and synchronized security? Well, there's three key areas that I want to drill into. So firstly, we expect to have accelerated threat discovery. So knowledge is power. If we can find it faster, we can remediate it faster. The purpose of the security heartbeat is to continually pump information about suspicious events that are happening at the endpoint and network, report the health status of each endpoint in real time. This provides more capabilities to identify newer, more complex threats faster. Now, the second key benefit is active source identification. So a rhetorical question to you all: if your network firewall alerted you to suspicious traffic on your network, I wonder how long it would take you to track down the specific computer that was causing that and address the threat. So if you just have a network or firewall security device that identifies a host on your network, say it's connecting out to somewhere it shouldn't, it may be to block that connection, which is great, but when it comes into looking into the incident, the administrator will typically just see a source IP address. I think how long it would take to take that source IP address and identify whose machine that was, where that machine is in your network, and whether there's any malware cleanup required. Without a synchronized security type of system, that investigation is a manual process. It's typically difficult to complete, and it's usually very time-consuming. So with the information that's provided from the endpoint to the network via the security heartbeat, as soon as this malicious traffic is identified, as well as this IP address, you'll also immediately know the machine name, the logged in username, and also which process or file is creating that connection out, all reported in the firewall console. So with no additional effort, the administrator will know what's happening, will not need to invest their time manually investigating, and I'm hoping at this point I'm getting some nods. A third key benefit is automated response. So because we can identify the user in the system, it's then possible to set up firewall rules very easily to automatically respond to these incidents. So compromised endpoints can be isolated automatically while the malware is terminated and removed from the endpoint. So you may be thinking firewall rules, that doesn't sound too easy. Well, actually, I'll give you an example. Using the security heartbeat, the endpoints will report either a green, yellow, or red health status to the firewall via the security heartbeat. You can just set up a simple firewall rule to isolate endpoints either from internal access to internal or sensitive applications whilst maintaining access to the internet, so there's a yellow status reported. Well, let's say an endpoint reports a red status, which likely means there's malware actively running and not being cleaned up. You can choose to automatically isolate that affected endpoint from both external traffic and internal traffic whilst you clean up that system. So not only does the automated response reduce the impact of the infection itself, but also saves the administrator a lot of time and an awful lot of firefighting. Potentially it also means that administrators don't need to be on call 24/7 for these types of incidents. So Sophos next-gen endpoint protection, I'm going to build out this slide. So endpoint protection in Sophos leverages a dozen or so technologies on the endpoint. For example, download reputation, malicious traffic detection, and our HIPS runtime detection. But what's key here is the brain behind our endpoint protection product, which is called Sophos System Protector. So by looking at all of these sensors within context, the Sophos System Protector can put the pieces together and identify a threat that any one component on its own may not have done. Now combine that with our next-gen network protection, which in its own right has a dozen or so technology or sensors and capabilities, all working together with its own brain, the Sophos firewall operating system. You now have 24 or so technologies protecting your environment, all communicating with each other via the security heartbeat, all interconnected to provide you protection. Now I'll do a really quick scenario here. So this build works, right? So in this particular scenario, a customer has very wisely invested in both our next-gen endpoint protection and our next-gen network protection offerings. In this situation, an endpoint is connecting out to somewhere that Sophos Labs doesn't think that it should. And the ATP detection capability or sensor within our network firewall is detecting this. It's able to block the traffic, and it's also able to report that up to the Sophos Cloud Management Interface, but also it's able to retrieve the information via the security heartbeat around the user of the endpoint, the system, the machine name, and also the file and process that's actually creating that that network connection. So immediately within your console, you can not only isolate that, automatically isolate the endpoint, but you can also see the context and investigate. That's just one example, and we have a number of different common scenarios that this solution will address very, very quickly, as well as a very compelling roadmap. But that's a good example around automatically isolating an endpoint as a result of a threat. Now, you may be thinking, hey, I can do this in a different way. I can get data from network and endpoint and make decisions around that information. And typically, and you're right, it is possible to do that via a SIM. And SIMs are widely used in the industry. I mean, examples being Splunk and Logarithm, for example, to collect data and correlate that data to better analyze across products. But let's look at the difference between this approach and the Sophos synchronized security proposition. So firstly, SIMs are typically resource intensive to set up. They take a lot of time to set up. They typically also require security professionals to interpret and make sense of that data. So I'm also keen to point out that Sophos synchronized security is not a replacement for a SIM. So a SIM is still incredibly useful for other things. Arguably, they're useful for what they were designed for, identifying trends for your longer-term strategic security posture. But in the context of accelerated threat discovery and fast, or even better, automated response, Sophos synchronized security is much more efficient, we feel. So there are a number of differentiators of the Sophos solution, but I'm going to highlight just two. And one, I said I was going to hammer it home, simplicity. Other vendors' approaches are complex. We keep it simple. There's nothing for the admin, the administrator to do to have Heartbeat start working. There's no additional agents to deploy. You just get it with our Cloud Endpoint Advanced license. And secondly, the ability to automate a response. Now again, we shouldn't underestimate the value of being able to automatically respond to a threat, to limit the impact and to prevent damage within your environment, whilst saving you time and money in the process. We also believe that Sophos is uniquely positioned to deliver synchronized security. We are the only security vendor that is a leader in both the Gartner MQ for endpoint protection as well as the Gartner MQ for unified threat management. In fact, most vendors don't appear in both MQs at all. So we're a mature vendor with proven strength in both the network and endpoint security spaces. But don't just take our word for it. In fact, we have a quote from analyst firm IDC's Vice President of Security Products and Services, Christian Christensen, who says, "No other security company is close to delivering this type of synchronized and integrated communication between endpoint and network security products." So I've labored on simplicity quite a lot. I'm going to continue to do so. Not only is the solution easy to set up and easy to use, but it's also easy to buy. So whereas some other vendors' solutions require that you buy add-on products or deploy additional consoles, deploy additional agents for any form of integration, we have a very simple proposition that requires just 2 licenses. One, you need a Cloud Endpoint Advanced license, and secondly, you need a next-gen or XG series firewall network security product license. It's a simple 2 SKU solution. You don't have to buy any add-on products or deploy additional agents. You just buy these 2 licenses and it just works. So to sum up, synchronized security is the answer to today's increasingly advanced attacks. The key benefits enabling from communication between endpoint and network are accelerated threat discovery. I mentioned if we knowledge is power, and if we can find it faster, then we can remediate faster. Secondly, active source identification. And thirdly, the ability to automatically respond to these types of threats. And as I've just mentioned, Sophos is uniquely positioned in the market to deliver synchronized security, and we're the first to deliver any such integration as this. Now, I appreciate that I've gone quite fast over what we're doing here in synchronized security space, but I would invite you to visit sophos.com/heartbeat to see a video demo of the product, see how it looks in the interface and how easy it is to use and the value you can garner from that. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Dave, who's going to talk to the NetApp product.
Basically, it utilizes the same Sophos endpoint protection technology that we use on desktops, laptops, and servers, but it's an off-box storage solution or scanning solution for NetApp storage. It really integrates seamlessly with the storage solutions that you have because it's designed specifically for them. It leverages like I said, the full Sophos endpoint protection, which means you get multi-layer protection, including our live protection, which is real-time cloud lookups. It increases that you can actually scale out with larger storage environments to keep performance and reliability high because the solution does scale and allows you to add multiple scanning devices. So I'll take you through and show you a little bit kind of an architecture, light architecture on how it works. Basically, like I said, it's an off-box solution, so we utilize a Windows computer to install Sophos Endpoint Security and Sophos Antivirus for NetApp. When a user in your environment tries to access a file on one of your NetApp filers, we intercept that file, we do the scan on it, we determine if the file is clean or not clean, and based on those results, we allow or deny access to the file. So again, it's not just a simple AV scan looking at a known bad list. We do take advantage of advanced and next-gen Sophos technologies in our endpoint protection, like I mentioned, including the live protection, which is a cloud lookup to Sophos Labs to ask, what's the latest disposition on this file or this process, so that we understand what the latest threat intelligence about that is, so we can take the most current action on that. One of the nice things about the AV for NetApp solution is that it does allow you to take advantage of either C mode or 7 mode in the NetApp world. So it works in both ways. And as I mentioned, it does have very efficient scaling in C mode, so you can work in a multi-filer and multi-AV machine modes to increase performance and keep it very reliable. It provides some load balancing or failover capabilities so that you always have that protection on. And the fact that I keep saying that it's real-time protection means that you're always going to have the latest and greatest up-to-date information on the threats. So I wanted to review one customer win that we had with AV for NetApp. It's one of the big 5 casinos in Las Vegas. Was definitely very security focused. They're always concerned about breaches. They're concerned about threats getting in, any other data getting out, and that's, as Paul mentioned before, that's what the bad guys are looking to do, is get data out because it's worth money to them. So in a organization that has a large NetApp environment, they decided that there was a key vector that was not being protected. They were looking for a way that was affordable and efficient to protect that data, and they recognized that Sophos AV for NetApp would be a great way to be able to protect them. So they implemented our solution. They've told us that they've actually seen threats. They've stopped files from opening because they have been infected. Things that weren't necessarily caught at an endpoint level or at a mobile device level, but are now being caught as they're coming off of storage or even going onto storage. And that gives them a much greater feeling of protection and allows them to go back to their board and their folks and say, hey, we're doing everything we can at every level to protect our data, to keep breaches from happening here, and we will continue to enforce security policies that make sense and allow us to continue to work well. So with that, I want to say thanks and turn it over to Kim for questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul and Dave, for all of their great insights. Very timely, obviously. At this point, we'd like to open it up for questions. As a reminder, if you have any questions about today's presentation, please post them to the questions pane in the GoToWebinar control panel. It looks like we do have a few questions coming in. Paul, probably for you. Question 1, is the Heartbeat technology supported on all end-user devices and platforms?
That's a great question. Thanks, Kim. Actually, particularly pertinent as I started this session talking about how comprehensive security is key and coverage across all devices and all platforms is important. So as of today, as of our synchronized security release last week, November 9th, we have Heartbeat coverage on user endpoints on Windows, so Windows 7 and above. We also have it in beta for Mac product. And we have a comprehensive roadmap for the synchronized security product, which includes extending that platform coverage into server operating systems and mobile devices through 2016.
Excellent, thank you. One more question. Is there another console to use for the integration between the network and the endpoint? It sounds like they're asking, do you need any other solution there?
Okay, and I could probably see where that question has come from, because with other vendor solutions where there's any kind of integration across control points, across products, quite often you'll have another console that you need to plug in or have to use to make sense of the data. With our solution, the answer is no. There's a Sophos Cloud console to manage the endpoint protection, and then there's the firewall console, the XG series firewall console, which will provide information from the endpoint heartbeat and provide you information about the user, and the system and the process that's calling out to that firewall using the heartbeat.
We do have another question from the audience. How is the NetApp product actually licensed?
That's a great question. So the NetApp product, like most of our solutions, is licensed by users. So we look at a user count. It's an easy way, since we have endpoint solutions and email and web and mobile device management and encryption solutions that all are licensed by user. We just kind of use that same model to make it simple, so we make sure that things are protected. The nice thing about Sophos AV for NetApp is that it's also a license that's included in our Sophos endpoint protection license. I keep saying Sophos endpoint protection because that's the core technology that the AV for NetApp sits on top of. So our customers who purchase our Sophos endpoint protection to replace their existing AV in their environments, desktop, laptop, server environments, actually get the AV for NetApp license included, as well as an anti-malware product for Exchange environments. So there's a few additional licenses that are included in the larger endpoint protection for customers who are interested in looking at consolidating these malware solutions to a single solution. But we do sell the AV for NetApp as a standalone that will work alongside any other antivirus or endpoint solution that you may have in your environment.
Excellent. Thank you so much for clarifying that. Great detail. And thanks so much to everyone for joining us today, for your time. That concludes the Q&A portion and today's event.